There's something you need to see. He raised his hands, the air shimmering around them. A portal opened, revealing a world bathed in darkness. It pulsed with a terrible, consuming energy. Narrator, a shattered cityscape. Smoke and ash filled the air. Captain Carter stood amidst the ruins, her shield heavy in her hand. She looked at Strange Supreme, his eyes filled with a sorrow that chilled her to the bone.
Carter stepped closer, her heart pounding. She saw a twisted reflection of her own world, a place where hope had died and despair reigned. This was not just another universe, she realized. It was a graveyard of possibilities.
This is what I did, his voice cracking. This is the price of my arrogance. He turned away, unable to bear the weight of her gaze.
The portal closed, leaving them in a silence heavier than the rubble around them.
Carter stared at Strange Supreme, her mind reeling. The darkness she had witnessed in that other world, the sheer scale of its destruction was almost beyond comprehension. It spoke of a power beyond anything she had ever encountered, a power that had been twisted and broken.
She thought of Steve, of the love they had shared, of the life that had been stolen from him. The pain of that loss was still fresh, a wound that refused to heal.
How? She whispered, her voice hoarse. How could you do this? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with accusation and disbelief. Carter felt a surge of anger, a burning rage against the man who had caused so much suffering. But even as the anger flared, she saw the despair etched on Strange Supreme's face, the pain that mirrored her own.
He had made a choice, a terrible choice, and now he was living with the consequences. Was he a villain? Or was he simply a man broken by grief? The Forge of Creation pulsed with cosmic energy, a swirling vortex of power that defied comprehension. Around it, the Guardians of the Multiverse stood ready, their faces grim.
They were a disparate group, heroes from across the vast expanse of reality, united against a common threat. Thor, his hammer crackling with lightning, stood beside the Wasp, her bioelectric blasts shimmering in the air.
Black Panther, his vibranium claws extended, watched the swirling vortex with a warrior's focus. They were ready to fight, to defend the Forge from the forces that sought to control it.
But even as they stood together, united in purpose, Carter felt a growing sense of unease. The enemy they faced was not an army of mindless drones, but a being of immense power, driven by a grief that resonated with her own. Could they truly defeat such an enemy? And even if they could, what would be the cost? The Forge was a nexus of creation, a source of infinite possibility. To unleash its power, to wield it as a weapon, was to risk unraveling the fabric of reality itself. The stakes were higher than any they had ever faced before.
Strange Supreme stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the Forge. It called to him, whispered promises of power, of a chance to undo the past, to rewrite the tragic narrative of his life.
He knew the danger, the potential for cataclysmic destruction, but the temptation was too strong to resist. He raised his hands, the crimson bands of the Vishanti glowing with an eerie light. The air crackled around him, the very fabric of reality bending to his will.
I can fix this, he murmured, his voice barely audible above the roar of the Forge. I can bring her back. He closed his eyes, focusing his will, channeling the cosmic energy into a single desperate act of creation.
But as the power surged through him, he felt a resistance, a force pushing back against his will. It was Carter, her shield raised, her eyes filled with a determination that mirrored his own. She wouldn't let him destroy himself, wouldn't let him sacrifice everything for a futile dream.
This isn't the answer, Strange.
Don't you understand? This is my fault. I have to fix this.
You can't bring back the dead, not like this. She stood before him, her shield a barrier against the torrent of energy that flowed from the Forge.
He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and anguish. He lashed out, a wave of energy erupting from his hands, but Carter stood firm, her shield absorbing the blow. The other Guardians watched the confrontation with a mixture of apprehension and uncertainty. They had faced down gods and monsters, but this was different. This was a battle of wills, a clash of ideologies fueled by the raw power of the Forge. The Forge pulsed with chaotic energy, its rhythm growing more erratic, more dangerous. The very air shimmered with the raw power of creation, threatening to unravel the delicate balance of the multiverse. Reality itself seemed to tremble on the brink of collapse.
Black Panther, his movements a blur, dodged a blast of energy, his claws slashing through the spectral figures that materialized around them. She met his every attack, her shield a bulwark against the storm of his power. Strange Supreme fought with a desperate fury, his powers amplified by the Forge, but Carter refused to yield.
Around them, the other Guardians battled the echoes of Strange Supreme's grief, the phantoms of his past. But for all their efforts, they were losing ground. The Forge was spiraling out of control, threatening to unleash a cataclysmic wave of energy that would shatter the barriers between universes, merging them into a chaotic, incomprehensible singularity.
Strange Supreme stumbled, his face contorted in pain. The power of the forge was overwhelming him, tearing at his mind, his body, his very soul.
He looked at Carter, her face pale with exhaustion, her shield dented and scarred from their battle.
He saw the determination in her eyes, the unwavering belief that he could be redeemed, that he could break free from the grip of his grief. And in that moment, he realized the truth. He could not change the past. He could not bring back the dead. The forge was not a source of salvation, but a crucible of destruction. He had been so focused on his own pain, his own loss, that he had failed to see the greater cost. With a surge of will, he cut the connection to the forge, the flow of energy ceasing abruptly. The chaotic pulses subsided. The air shimmered and settled. The Guardians watched, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. The battle was over, but at what cost? The Forge of Creation stood silent, its power subdued, its chaotic energy contained. Around it, the Guardians of the Multiverse gathered, their faces grim, their bodies weary from the battle. They had faced a threat unlike any other, a threat born not of malice, but of grief.
You saved us, she said, her voice soft. You stopped yourself.
He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and gratitude.
Carter approached Strange Supreme, who stood hunched and defeated, the weight of his actions heavy upon him. He had lost everything, sacrificed everything, in his pursuit of a futile dream. And yet, in his defeat, she saw a glimmer of hope. Through Carter's resilience, through the unwavering belief of the Guardians, he had found a different path, a path of acceptance, of letting go. The multiverse was safe, but the scars of his actions would forever remain.